Starting out my YouTube channel with a broken car. This is my 2003 350Z rear mount turbocharged, forged internals. I'll go over a whole build breakdown at some point, but the issue we've got going on today is valve cover. Gaskets are leaking. There you go, sneaky snail. Valve cover gaskets are leaking, and this is the second or third time I've actually replaced the valve cover gaskets. Technically the third. I replaced them one time when I first got the car a couple weeks afterwards, and that was actually whenever the car was NA. This was my daily driver at one point in time. Then I replaced them whenever I built the motor, and now about 1,200 miles later or so, I guess I didn't do a good job sealing them or whatever because they're leaking again. The symptoms of that whenever you have a failed valve cover gasket on a VQ35DE on the HRs as well is typically it will be leaking from the back corner of the valve cover. But essentially the very back corner will leak when you get high into RPMs. It'll run down the side of your block and go down onto the header. Of course, it's going to smoke everywhere. It stinks. It looks broken. So that's annoying. I've got holes in my hood, so it smokes everywhere. So we're going to get that wrapped up. These are the tools that you're going to need to be able to have to do this at a bare minimum. It has a very specific torque sequence and torque spec of 90 inch-pounds. We'll go over that later, but you will 100% need to go to AutoZone. I think that's who carries this cheap PT flex torque wrench. It's a 1/4 inch. It only goes to 80 foot-pounds, or 80 inch-pounds, excuse me. But I normally just overclock it over to 90, and it's pretty close, and that will work just fine for you. But you'll need a pry tool so you can get some of the clips off. They'll probably break anyways, but it's always good to try. 3/8 ratchet with 10mm socket. I believe 10mm is all we need to get this entire thing done. Everything we're going to be using is going to be 10mm bolts and an extension. Obviously the more you have the better, so you may need some 3/8, some 1/2 inch sockets, some extensions. You know, the more tools you got the better, but at a bare minimum this is what you're going to need. Here's the valve cover gaskets you need. It comes in a pair of the both driver and passenger side valve cover gaskets. Here's the part number. It's Felpro. So you're only going to get the valve cover gasket that goes around the actual cylinder head. It does not come with the spark plug seals. The spark plug seals, unfortunately, they come with the valve cover. They are part of the valve covers. The service manual calls for some RTV silicone to be placed in specific corners. I usually put it across the entire gasket. We'll go over that later. But you are going to need to go to your local O'Reilly's, AutoZone, pick up some Permatex Ultra Black is what I typically use. And you're also going to need some brake cleaner. I don't have any of that, so we're going to take a quick trip to my local hardware store and take the G. My local 7-Eleven opened up like new. Got a free slushie and a free hot dog. So I lied about only needing a 10mm. You are going to need a 12 or 13 to get your strut bar off. So in order to get to the valve covers on these cars, you're gonna have to take the entire intake manifold plenum off, the whole thing. It's very inconvenient, but it's part of it. So the first thing you're gonna start with is your engine cover. It should be the same on 350Zs, on G35s. It covers the whole thing, but they're just 10mm to go around. So that goes, your intake goes, and any vacuum lines you have hooked up around. You also want to unhook the, I think that's a charcoal canister solenoid or whatever, and as well as the vacuum valve or vacuum hose that attaches to that. I also failed to mention that there are going to be vacuum lines here. I repurposed this one for my boost gauge. But you will have a vacuum line here that goes to your PCV valve here. Obviously mine's routed differently. There's going to be things that are routed differently on mine, but you get the idea. You'll want to unplug your throttle body. The plug for that is right here once you get your intake off. you just squeeze on the back and slowly wiggle it off. Be careful with that plug because it's pretty fragile. From there, we're good to go ahead and start unbolting these. So it's a bunch of 10 millimeters all along the top, on the back here, there, all the way around the front. There's one back here, two back there actually. And that's it. So once all those are taken off, this whole top cover will come off, and then we'll be able to take the lower cover off. It's also good to note that these four are longer than all of the ones that go around. This one is longer, as well as one or two of them. So make sure you set them aside. I'm not gonna do that because I've done this enough times. I know which one goes where, but get you a cardboard box or something and put them where they came out with a diagram, take pictures, something. But just know that that hardware is all different sizes and they can only go back where they came from. Once you get all the hardware from around the intake manifold and it's now loose, make sure you put them aside, keep them separate. Like I said, I know where they all go, so I've done this a time or two. But you're now ready to go ahead and take the top half of the intake manifold off. You are going to want to go ahead and grab a pair of pliers because when this comes off, there are two antifreeze coolant lines that go to the throttle body that you will need to disconnect. It is a major pain in the ass to get them disconnected. Although you can delete them. I think that's what I'm going to do. So there are those two coolant lines. Get your pliers. It's really nice to do this with two people, this particular step at least. Yeah, but I'm definitely not putting these back on. If I can find some caps, I'm gonna cap them off. And then it should be free. Yep. Okay, so from here, I actually have an intake manifold spacer. You won't have this, you'll just have this one gasket right here that you'll be able to pull off. And the next is these 10 millimeter bolts. And then there's two 10 millimeter nuts on the front and the back. Those are easy to miss. But once you have those off, then the lower plenum will come off. Again, you're gonna wanna break these loose by hand to make sure you don't strip any of them or break it or anything, because trust me, this is not a good time. That will turn your couple-hour job into a week job. Then go back with the impact. These ones are all the same size, so they can go back wherever. It doesn't really matter. Now, I actually have spacers for the intake manifold spacer, so you won't have these, so don't worry about them. You'll just have this plate that will come off like this, and then your gasket will come off. Mine, I used RTV, so it's stuck down, but yours should just fall right off. But that's trash now. And then there's gonna be your two 10 millimeter nuts that hold the front and the back of the intake manifold. Impacts are not the best thing in the world. Almost the best thing in the world, but not quite. So from this point now we can lift the lower intake manifold. Keep in mind that the bottom of this is flat for the gasket, so don't set this on concrete or anything. Get you a towel,